I will call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order at 6 o'clock on Thursday, October the 7th. The purpose, first of discussion, if there's anything from anyone that would like to speak first. If not, we will go to the County Executive Budget.
All right, it's good to be here. It's always an exciting night. A lot of work has gone into today. It's hard to believe this is now the 8th budget, and I'd like to think that we've established some trust along the way and some good previous experiences that I hope carry into this year. We did deviate a little bit in the budget. I'll start with some of the obvious big items that we've all looked at. We are under the tax cap again at 2.69%, but the one deviation that from previous years is we did use just over $1 million more in fund balance. So, and it's a little bit of a change, but I felt very strongly that this year was the year to make some changes and address employee issues, but I'll get into that in a minute. When we look at our fund balance, obviously we had a really good year, almost doubled, went up to 12.6. And in looking at this year, it's likely, after talking to the treasurer and the chairman, that we'll probably be more like 15, if not more, when this year's all said and done, and likely not use any of the fund balance that was allocated for this year. So that's a good thing. We've got a few years of really coming in, in a large part thanks to sales tax, coming in and growing our fund balance. So that's a good thing. But as I spoke with Ashley Onion today, she said, well, why are you still at where you're at on the tax rate? And my answer to her was, well, sales tax is variable. We can have good years, you can have bad years, but we've all tended to agree that we want to be just under the tax cap, and so that is our only reliable, pretty constant revenue source at the county. So that's why we decided to go with the 2.69%. And I know it's some care more than others, but certainly having felt the brunt of it in years past, it's nice to see that there weren't any real drastic variations as a result of the equalization rate this year across our city and our towns. And actually, after quite a roller coaster ride with the city of Amsterdam, given this year's budget, you'll actually see the tax rate drop from the 2.69, and in the town, it's I think just 0.25%. So that was a big sigh of relief for me personally. I did also want to note that we did include $250,000 in the personnel budget for pending contract negotiations, but the number with all the unions out there as we head into next year is probably more like $500,000 to $750,000. So, but a lot of that is standard. We've been through this a number of times now. We know that mandates really drive spending at the county, and there's not a whole lot that we really manipulate year to year. The budgets have been pretty straightforward. This year, it became very clear to me in our meeting specifically with the Sheriff's Office, with DPW, with DSS, especially with our caseworkers, we are having some trouble hiring and retaining people at a series of positions. And in these four, I would say it's borderline crisis mode. And throughout the whole organization, we are seeing some really significant challenges with hiring and retaining employees. On top of that, and we've had this issue for some time, I know the sheriff has talked to me about salaries and within his department. It has been exacerbated by circumstances lately with private sector job growth and the pressure on wages because workers are so scarce. And unfortunately, we're seeing things like employees bringing in other job advertisements into the break room, advertising well over $20 an hour, and it's really been a challenge for us. So, and also the last thing I'll say is that the retirement package does not attract people like it used to. A lot of people are saying, what is the money I'm going to have in my pocket? So we really decided to really look at where we're at, and in talking with a few of the legislators today, some pretty lengthy conversations, which I'm very appreciative for, I think it's important to talk about how we got to where we're at today. So we started with the 4 or so positions that we knew were in borderline crisis mode. And then we built out from there, because obviously if you're addressing 4 big positions that, you know, are multiple titles, you're going to have some ripple effect. So one example would be the senior caseworkers. And I have to give a lot of credit and a lot of thanks to our personnel officer, who, as you'll see in some of the backup documentation, really went position by position, has performed numerous desk audits, has researched other counties, looked at what the private sector is offering, even when, you know, there is a flyer for a job opportunity in a break room, even takes the time to go look up what the benefit package is at that particular organization in order to show, you know, what the comparisons really and truly are. And we are certainly in a bind because of, you know, the benefit package not attractive. But so when you look through, and I think now is a good time to talk about some of the backup documentation, we've gotten, you know, pretty attuned to what is expected. Just some of the big pieces that are in here that I think you'll appreciate are obviously, probably what we'll dig into tonight is the year-over-year net, which is department by department. You have 2020 and 2021, all the resolutions that were established positions, which is always an issue that we have talked about in years past. This year you have a document that shows that, and we've had, you know, from time to time we've missed a position in the budget, and that's been an issue, so you have that. You also have the multi-year adopted versus actual report, which has been requested, usually every year. And then in addition to that, because again, like I said, the approach here was to try to solve the greatest challenge that is facing the county right now from a perspective of, you know, our daily operations, which is the hiring and retaining of employees. You'll see 2022 proposed changes to the budget, as well as a very detailed spreadsheet that I'm going to refer to as the salary reallocation plan. In addition to that, there's some other documents in there, but I think those are the big ones. And as we go through and work through this process, both personnel officer, the treasurer, and myself are happy to go through. There hasn't been a change that has been made that has not been willy-nilly, that has been willy-nilly, or just, oh, the executive wants this or that. We've really, truly looked at comparisons to other counties, private sector, and the ability to retain and hire. So, you know, I think as we go through our process, you know, if there are particular line items that, you know, you'd like to see that, we'll be happy to provide that. To do that for every single one might be a little daunting, so if there's a way we can narrow that down a little bit or kind of take it piecemeal, I think it'd be good, because I think if Nicole went through them one by one, it could be 3 to 4 hours minimum, but you know, we'll see. But so you let me know about that. But all in all, I think it was, this year's budget really is an attempt to try to boost morale, tackle some really serious issues related to staffing that our department heads are clamoring for. And I'll be honest, this is our 8th year. I have not proposed some sweeping changes like this in all the time that I've been county executive. And trust me, I hear the requests from the employees. And I've seen what the employees have done throughout the pandemic, and really truly believe that in addition to the changes I've proposed here, and you'll see in the documentation that I provided about the federal relief funding, I think we need to take another step and provide premium pay to our employees in the form of a $3,000 for each full-time employee, as well as $1,500 for part-time, and have that based on hours worked, so therefore there's some fairness within the organization. We've worked out a lot of the details with that, and you know, I've even spoken to some of our union leadership there. So, you know, we sensed the problem early on. We tried to be thoughtful in the way we handled it. I understand that anytime you're proposing changes like this, and just to put a number on it, you're looking at about just over $200,000 for the personnel changes that I've made in this budget. And you also have, in looking, and I'm sure we'll see it in the year-over-year departmental net, the changes that have been adopted by this body in 2020 and 2021. And I'll also say that some of the changes that have been made, the department heads have been very clever at, trying to absorb costs within their budget. So, for example, even in personnel, trying to spread costs over multiple funds to limit the impact on local taxpayers. And then also, just would highlight, there's also some other items, and I'll bring up DPW, for example. You'll see the addition of a couple positions, but also one of the positions that's in there, I believe it's Director of Finance. It was funded for 2 months. A lot of times in these departments, and we just went through it with payroll, having one payroll person and no redundancy in the position. When people retire, oftentimes that information goes right out the door, and I give a lot of credit to Eric for developing a transition plan and doing that with his staff and then bringing that information to me. So you'll see a little bit of the transitioning due to retirements and things of that nature. The 4 big positions, and then as we spread out from there, addressing some of the ripple effect, and also trying to make sure that we keep and pay within reason based on what's happening outside of us for some other positions. So that's how we got to where we're at today. I understand there's a lot of information there and probably a lot of explanations that are required, and we've already gotten to that quite a bit, like I said, with some conversations yesterday and today. And just like in years past, I look forward to those discussions. So I hope that at the very least you feel good about the information that was presented, how it was presented. We've given you a lot of what you wanted in years past, and now we can begin the journey of taking this proposed executive budget and trying to finish up with an adopted budget that we all, for the most part, believe in. So with that said, I'd be happy to take any questions or maybe review some of these documents for you and kind of take it from there rather than continue to ramble for another 10 or 15 minutes.
Matt?
Yeah.
In regards to I would call them the new salaries, and we're looking at new contracts.
Correct.
So how would those two things come together? So with those salaries being created and then a new contract being created, would those again change, or would they?
So the percentage change of the contract will be added to the base. When we adjusted the base, we also anticipated likely first-year salary settlements to get a projected salary to then compare that to where we are. I'll give you caseworker as an example. We looked at what the increase in the base was, plus what we're projecting, and again, we're in negotiations right now, and there's a lot of personnel issues here, and I want to make sure we're careful with some of that, and make sure we're staying above board, and Nicole doesn't, we don't cross any lines, so to speak, but that was taken into consideration in the process of developing these new base salaries for those 4 positions as well as the others. So when we sat down and reviewed them as a team, we had in some of the spreadsheets you have, it's not in there now, but it was in there and is in there in some internal documents. We'd be happy to review those with you as we go through the next couple weeks. But those were all taken into consideration, where we expect to land and what that base is, and then where is that base going to put us in comparison to other counties. So for example, caseworker, we will be positioned slightly higher than other counties. And one of the issues we've run into, even though it's a 5-hour longer work week in Saratoga, we've lost a number of people to Saratoga because the salaries are better. Now, they're better partially because there's an extra 5 hours in the week, but this will put us in a position where I don't think we're going to run into that issue as much because that piece is off the table. And so I don't mean to ramble, but yes, those have absolutely been taken into consideration when trying to, and then Nicole's process, and maybe this actually would be a good time just to talk a little bit generally about your process and looking at comparables, and I think I'm going to put you on the spot here, but just generally, what you're looking at when you're doing your desk audit, you're doing you're coming up with your recommendations here.
Right. I tend to look at, like size counties, if that's what you're talking about, how I usually go about it. I have a series of people that I can speak to in throughout the state. We look for the population size, we look for similar characteristics like that, similar titles that they have. I compare their work hours versus our work hours, their starting salaries, their first year salaries. And then I tend not to use the bigger counties, like Schenectady, Saratoga. It really skews when you're looking at their population sizes are so much larger. And then I bring it down to a good handful, 8 to 9 different counties, and get our average that way. Of course, the surrounding counties do include Schenectady, so I'm mindful of that, but they're not generally a good comparison.
Not a good comparison because they're higher, or?
Their population is much larger, so their salaries are comparable to their larger population. Is what I'm
So I guess what I'm saying is if we based it off of that and weighted that more, you probably have a little bit higher than what we have right now.
Yeah.
So if you use Schenectady and Saratoga, who are bordering counties, who would be the competition for our employees, I would say. That's where I guess I'm
Well, we're
struggling.
close, but I think in wanting to make sure that let's just put it this way, we're starting with these counties, and yeah, if we wanted to go that step further, I mean, we could, but, you know, we wanted to first at least give ourselves a competitive advantage against similar counties. I think taking another step, you know, that would, you know, it'd just be, it pushes salaries even higher if you really took those larger counties if you do it as an example.
It would. I just think it skews it a little bit, but it's taken into consideration.
And yes, I mean, there's no doubt we're competing against them in certain cases, you know, like the caseworkers, where we feel that where we landed, what puts us in a more competitive position, for sure. And certainly a far cry from where we currently are right now.
So Matt,
Yes, sir.
as it pertains to personnel expenses that seem to be top of mind with everybody here, a 1,000-foot view of what you're saying here as you framed this was, for the first time in a long time, we're putting a budget together from a position of strength. You know, I mean, as compared to the last 4 years that I was involved in the finance, committee as chair. I mean, you did, just a review. I mean, we ended last year with a fund balance of $12,400,000. We had budgeted $2.5 million, and as Matt said, we didn't use a dime of it. We grew fund balance without using fund balance last year to the tune of $5.285 million. We're on pace to do that again this year. We budgeted $2.5 million from fund balance to balance our budget. And this is all a function of the sales tax. Last year, I think we budgeted $31 million. We made $35 million. And so that $4 million in excess helped contribute to that syndrome. We're having a similar year this year where we budgeted 31.5 and we're on pace for 39 to 40. So we're probably going to net somewhere in the vicinity of 7 million more in sales tax than we budgeted, thereby not using the 2.5 million that we budgeted this year. So that will go back into fund balance, as well as the excess of sales tax. So that's where I think Matt was coming from is, we could be in a position when the books are closed on this year where our unappropriated fund balance is up to $16-17 million because of that. So, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get to the bottom of here is you chose this year to whack these positions, get them up to speed with other places, endure the ripple effect they may have on our budget, because we're in a position of strength to do it. I mean, we didn't use, I mean, if you look at this year-over-year comparison, we're using the year-over-year departmental comparison of expenses. They're going up $2 million. The last 3 years, 18 they went up 606, 19 they went up 447, 20 they went up 651, 21 they went up 437 year over year. This year it's $2 million. We were in a vicinity of 400,000 to 600,000 those 4 previous years. Now we've got year over year changes of $2 million.
Correct.
But I mean, what I'm getting at is, if ever there was a year that we were best positioned to do it, it's going to be this year.
Yes, and I would agree wholeheartedly with that, and also add that over the years, as when you're the day-to-day CEO, you see what people are giving and contributing to this organization, and it really hurts sometimes not being able to do more. And this is just an attempt to really stick up for the people that are in the trenches every day, working their tails off. And, when you look at the changes I've made, and this is certainly a big topic of focus because everybody wants to make sure it's done appropriately and there's no shenanigans going on and things of that nature, which I assure you everything has been past the muster of our personnel officer. And a lot of them has been driven by her recommendations. It is just about $200,000 of a $126 million budget. So if we keep that in perspective and we look at some of the other costs that we've had just through resolution in 2020 and resolution through 2021, and even look at some of the departmental changes, there are cost drivers that are driving our budget that are outside of this. This is just one piece of it. And I would say that, yes, it is certainly a lot to swallow. It's not usually what we do, but I just ask for an open mind to consider what the impact is going to be on our employees and really trying to make Montgomery County a place that people really love to work, feel appreciated, respected. And I think by addressing these issues, as well as looking at the premium pay, I think that's a great way to say thank you to the employees and show that we not only are just willing to support them, but also, put the money where our mouth is and try to address some of the issues to boost their morale, and in the same time, help some of our department heads who have been clamoring for some of these things. And, our sheriff is one of the ones who's been in my ear the most. And, when I told him that I was going to propose, the nurse change and the dispatcher change, I actually can't say in a public setting how happy he was and what he said to me. This is really, it's been a long time coming, and we've tried to hold the line, and like you said, legislator Pep, if there was a year to do this, this is the year, and I would just keep in perspective the cost of the changes that I proposed in this initiative for this year's budget, and that is just over $200,000.
That part I do want to ask you, simply from a standpoint, I don't know where, and I'm not trying to get too ultra specific yet, but when you say the net effect of these positions is $200,000, yet we look at, I'm sorry. I was going to say like the DA's office, $230,000 in and of itself, but they were added this year.
Correct. So
they weren't added, it was in 2021.
And the fact that you brought it up, the year-over-year net in that one department is bigger than all these changes to base salaries combined.
Okay.
Matt?
And these are, very difficult jobs.
I can see what you do or doing, and I think it's appreciated, so what happens to the other individuals that aren't included, whose salaries are also not up to par? I mean,
that's a fantastic question, and that has been something that Nicole and I have been working on for weeks now. So, as I said, it creates a ripple effect. And one of the things, you're never going to make everyone happy. And we understand that even there are things that we did not include that we still feel are appropriate. But we tried to look at and focus on the issue of retention and hiring and prioritize that, which is why the 4 big titles were chosen. And then in looking at other titles, seeing A, how do they compare to other counties, and B, are we having a hard time filling them? So to those other folks that may not be part of this specific change, what I would say is we're trying to address the biggest needs that we see right now, but also we are heading into negotiations, and we certainly are keeping the outside influences at mind, and I can't talk too much about that, but I think we're going to have a good positive result there. But also, I think that's also the importance of simultaneously doing the premium thing, because and having that done based on hours worked, so there's some fairness across the organization. So no matter who you are at the county, you're going to get a little boost, and there's going to be a real show of appreciation for the work that's been done in what has been for many and all of us probably one of the more difficult years we've all ever been through.
So as you all know, I'm very pro-labor. I support our employees. I think we all should be, not we all should, everybody should be paid. I guess my confusion is, we're doing two things at once. We're giving groups that we feel deserve more money now. And then we're going to negotiate with the unions on top of that for another adjustment. And I mean, couldn't you just put all that into the negotiations with these labor groups? And because I think your point is valid of, well, what about me? I mean, someone watching this on Facebook today that cleans toilets, saying, "Oh, that's great, but what about me?"
Well, I'd be happy to sign you up for base salary increases across the board, Bertel.
Well,
Honestly, if we do it across the board, I would.
But basically, what I'm saying is the mechanism to do that is through the contract negotiations to do that equally or distributed by the people that are represented by these groups. I'm not being critical. I'm just thinking out loud.
And there's some reasoning behind that. And really, if we began that negotiating process based on previous experiences, I don't think we would have been done for budget time this year, and I doubt we would have been done for budget time next year. And it's a pretty lengthy process. And really, what we try to do is look at all the tools in the toolbox. And one thing I can tell you, and I can tell you confidently, is not only is my office day-to-day answering the calls and have the relationships with the employees and have a good pulse on what's going on, but also Nicole and personnel work with the department heads and staff. We put a lot of thought into this and finding a way to focus on the areas where we know you're almost in crisis mode. And Jeff, what would you say about dispatchers and your ability to hire and recruit people? It's just, and the salary they're getting is almost insulting. And so when you look at the organization, you see titles that we have no problem filling, and they're great jobs and people love to work there. But when you look at these titles specifically, nurses, after what they've been through this past year, dispatchers, who are often referred to as the forgotten first responders. You look at the MEO1s and MEO2s and what they're being paid. And then you look at the caseworkers, which are probably one of the single-handedly toughest jobs in the county. They are almost in crisis mode and action needs to be taken. It's not to say that other titles aren't warranted looking at. And Nicole, how many desk audits have you done? And we're constantly looking at that stuff, but we feel very confident that this proposal is right for the organization, will be well received, and you're always going to have some folks that say, hey, why not me, why not that? I would love to be in a situation where we could raise base salaries for all our employees, but we chose to use the tools in the toolbox. Negotiations is one tool. Moving forward with a budget that addresses these things is another tool, and the federal COVID money was another tool. And my hope and goal is by pushing these things forward, that we can boost morale and create a little bit better of an environment where we're going to be able to hire and retain. But it's quite well taken. It's an option we could have taken. I'm not sure we would have gotten it done. The timeliness is a big concern.
Well understood.
Matt, yeah, I'm not clear on some of this.
Sure.
Are some of these union positions to begin with?
Yes.
And how do you do that? I mean, typically you can't.
Okay, so you want to take that
I'm
one?
under the impression that you can't select certain members of the union and give them a raise without addressing negotiations.
So you can,
As
and
much as they might
obviously-
like it.
Yeah, and we've had discussions with labor about this. This is not something that's going to come as a really dramatic surprise. These are things that the union have been asking for. So there's nothing in here that is all of a sudden going to be something that's viewed as a shot over the bow and now it's time to fight. If we wanted to go through and do it through negotiations, I think that's one option, and certainly as we go forward, we'll discuss more, and if there's other proposed changes, but Nicole and I have a good relationship with our CSE leadership as well as the rep, and I would just say that this has been very well received.
Hard to believe, frankly, but I hope that's the case.
Well, and we're not here cutting positions, reducing salaries. We're trying to really do what we can to address some pretty serious issues we're having.
Yeah, I've been on both sides of the table, and I don't see this going as smoothly as we're anticipating right now.
And you know what? Well, this was a year where I committed to try to force the issue because I see it as a real challenge. And if we gotta, bear down and deal with some issues after the fact, I'm happy to take on that challenge on behalf of the employees of this county because they deserve it.
I'm just concerned about the morale of some of the other employees. Now, I can see the morale of the employees that are going to be benefiting and then negotiating a contract to maybe even doing better than the ones that aren't included in here and worked during the pandemic and did other things, and those are the ones that I'm more concerned with the morale of those, saying, you know what, we're worth nothing here, and they stick around and do less, or they just get up and go. And
well, this is what I would say. If an employee who is in a position that we've deemed, and when you look at it, is being compensated adequately and fairly for the job they work, have then received a premium pay bonus for working through COVID, and then we head into a contract year next year, if that person does not like their job at that point, I don't think there's anything we're going to do to change that mind. And for many, many years, this is the type of conversation that has prevented us from moving forward on some of these things. And you know what? If this is going to push the discussion forward, like I said, this was just a year that I wanted to really stick up for the employees and really try to address some really serious issues we have in the organization.
all right.
So, what overall, it doesn't have to be exact, what is the total amount of benefits that you're talking about for this increase for personnel? Just a ballpark. Yes,
Sure. So if we're at 218 for salary, just to give us a ballpark.
Well, the ones with salary changes are already receiving benefits. So there's no change in that particular proposal. Overall, with some other changes, positions, you have another document there with added positions.
Yeah, so I guess what the point is that,
So if you're under 300,000.
Yeah, and I'd probably say, after I just had a second to process that, a lot of these are, positions we already have, so you're not going to have much of an additional fringe benefit. Maybe there's a little increase on retirement contributions or things of that nature, but I suspect the big chunk of it. So I would say probably more like 250.
Right. So, in my opinion, in a budget of $27 million, $300,000 isn't a whole lot of money to put forward for the employees. my bigger concern is the $6.7 million increase from last year. $300,000 is basically jump change for that. And, you know, Mike, you said that the fund balance continues to grow. Typically, when I hear that, I think we're taxing our taxpayers too much. I think if we continue to grow a fund balance, we need to give them a break. We also should be paying off debt that we have, not continuing to pay interest on it. If we have an increase in sales tax, that's great. Let's use that and get rid of some debt so that we're not paying interest. And that's going to save us money in the long run too. So you have that, take that off the bottom end there. So I see $300,000 increase. What is the other $6.4 million?
And maybe that'd be even a good segue to go through the department by department, but I don't know if Sean,
No,
you want to,
Brian,
this has been a discussion you guys have spoken about.
After we spoke yesterday, this year's budget's 126.7, right? And last year's is 121.10. Your point's still valid. I think the difference is 5.6 million, but your point is still valid. I mean,
So last year's is,
was 121.1, this year's 126.7.
so I had it at 119, so it's 121. So it's still
Yeah, no,
it's still 5 point.
the concept is
It's still almost,
Yeah.
that increase is still almost double the increase since the legislature was incorporated.
Yeah.
So I guess we need to, in my opinion, I need to know what that additional amount is.
Sure, and I think, really as we look to the department budget comparison from last year, this year, you see, we can hone in on some of those changes, but there are some larger issues at play, and I know Sean and Mike have spoken about this. You want to take the first crack at this, Sean?
Matt, one second. Well, you had a, we went for personnel to something else. I don't know if you want to have anything with the personnel still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, just quick, was the reimbursement rate considered for the social services position? Is that just the whole amount?
That's the total amount of money that wasn't included in the, what you have.
So it'd be, for the social services, it'd be 70, 80, 90% less, depending on what position it is.
Yeah, and or that, piece of increase, yeah, you're probably paying 20-30% of that.
I mean, and I think the operative question that Brian is coming up with here is this. We know where 2 million of it is. It's in your explanations here.
Yes.
300 of which is personnel related, but it's 5.6 and it's 2 million. Where's the other 3.3?
Yeah, and if you look at the net effect, the 2 million here, that's what I always look at, because a lot of times, because of the nature of the county in which we're a lot of times passing through state and federal programming, that can balloon that number. But when you look at the actual net effect within departments on local taxpayers, that's that 2 million that you were referring to. And if you really, that 2 million is made up in, the net from this department to department,
Right,
year over year sheet here. So that 2 million is really where I focus my attention.
those are the things you had control over.
Well, somewhat, but as you look at the 20 and 21 resolutions, a lot of these things have been adopted by the legislature. So when you add in the different mandated programs and the things we have to do, the contractual increases, the maintenance increases, the 200,000 that we have here, you end up getting to that $2 million number pretty quickly. I think with the, part of being in New York State county is, that you have more and more programming and then more and more funding coming from the state and federal government trying to, solve issues, and we end up, are the one on the ground trying to deal with that. Sean, do you want to speak to some of that from a broader perspective?
As far as the majority of the increase, the $6 million increase in the overall budget, 5.2 million is the general fund. That is offset by over 3 million, about 3 million, 2.9 of revenue. So the net in the general fund is is a 2-1 that's on this thing. So yes, the budget did increase by 6 million, but on the flip side, you gotta look at the revenue side too, to see what the offset revenue is. So in essence, the net effect is the budget grew by 6, by 3.
And then,
It was great.
yeah, and then when you look at that net of 2 million, and then you get that breakdown by each department, you know, within that, and you see pretty quickly that you know, it'll add up pretty quickly. I mean, you got 150,000 in my budget, you have 418 in personnel, 250 in health, dental, and vision, which are to be expected, 378 the sheriff's office, 318 in social services, and obviously 240 in the district attorney. You know, you get to 2 million pretty quickly with those changes. And again, I would say that when you look in the budgets, you know, yes, I proposed $200,000 worth of frontward or employee salary issues, but you know, a great majority of that stuff is you know, coming from, you know, costs that a lot of times are out of our control.
You do recognize under some of these explanatory bullets that some of these increases personnel expense, like the example I mentioned a minute ago and then realized we already adopted it somewhere during 2021. You know, you go down the list, the county executive, 80,000, the soil and water position this year. Emergency management this year, personnel, 22 this year, you know, mental health, 44.5 this year, district attorney, 230 this year. So it's just,
So
now it's a full year's worth.
yeah, and just like you know, we often tease you, but you know, when you pull back the onion, you start at that 6 million, then you look at the offsetting revenue, then that number's down to 2. Then you take away what's been done by resolution last year, and that number is even lower. So you really end up seeing, you know, how difficult it is to move the needle on things you want to try to do, because so much of it is has already been determined as we are at this spot right now. And the reason that I wanted to, you know, strike now on this issue, and going back to Bob's point and Legislator Duchesse's point, is the financial situation that was described so far, but we've been told time and time again when we come mid-year that we would like to see these things happen during the budget. So, you know, that's really why, a big reason why we said now's the time, and I'll be honest, it was, you know, I was the driving force to try to make sure we got this done, and task Nicole was starting with the 4 positions and then dealing with the ripple effect from there. So, you know, all that put together, that's how we came to where we are today.
Just one more question, getting back to the contracts. How would it strike you if we put this kind of money in the budget, but yet held it back for negotiations, even though it's showing you in the end? I understand that.
I'm willing to work whatever road we need to take to get to the end result. I'm okay with it. I wanted, like I said, I wanted to just, my goal here is to get it done. If the legislature wished to try to take a different road to get there, I'm open to that. But again, I wanted to be here today having this discussion, and if we got to take a different road and we want to try to go down that path, I'd be open to that.
I just have a real strong sense that this is going to be more problematic than it might appear when it comes to negotiations.
Sure. Well, you know, we have another meeting on Tuesday, and, you know, we have been and will continue to circle back with our unions, and I'll give you an update as to where we're at, the temperature, so to speak, and take it from there.
So I was going to ask what Roy asked, but I'll bring it further. So if we look at the spreadsheet with that shows the caseworkers and the senior caseworkers, it's 87 $100,000 increase. So are we saying that out of that increase, 72% of that is going to be picked up by state and federal, which would be $63,000?
Yes, I mean, these are going to fall into DSS reimbursement.
So the net then out of the 218 after the reimbursement rates is 155,000. Is that correct?
Sounds about right off the top of my head.
About correct?
Yeah.
On that,
Okay.
with reimbursements, do we just, that number is a set number, correct? Or is it, I don't know.
Yeah, it will fluctuate, you know, again, DSS budget is a mammoth, but yes, those claims are tied directly to
But
employees.
the state doesn't give us, if we had 100 employees, we can't just continue going after that number. There's a $500,000 or $1 million cap. There has to be a cap.
There's an admin cap in social services.
Yes.
So we can have much higher salaries, but we're only gonna get reimbursed so much when the day's come.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shell game at times to try to maximize your reimbursement. I don't think that, it'd be a great question for DSS next week as far as the specifics on how this would impact it. But I imagine, I would have to assume that a portion of that increase would have to be absorbed in that.
And different DSS programs have different reimbursement
Yeah,
rates.
I agree, but the thing is, we just can't look at a number and say, all these salaries are gonna be 80%.
At the very worst, you know, this is
I'm sorry.
the
No, I said it's 120.
the total number. So, you know, it can, with reimbursements, it can only go down from there. As far as exactly how much, I think that's something we could look at.
But a considerable amount of it probably is reimbursable.
Yeah.
And it's based on your cost base, right?
I think
As
that's
opposed
a
to.
very safe assumption, yes.
Okay, so I had a couple more questions. The premium pay bonus of $3,000 and $1,500 for the part-timers. That's COVID relief money.
Correct.
That's,
Would have to be passed by resolution.
but I mean, it's doesn't affect our budget.
Correct.
Okay.
Legislator Patel, can I just make a statement based on what you just said? I spoke with Sean about it. We got 4.7, it's sitting in a deferred revenue account. It will come out, each one of those things by resolution. It won't affect our finances and fund balance.
The other thing I just want to be careful about when we talk about budgeting and fund balance and things like that, you know, when we're done negotiating with the unions, we're going to have an impact on our fund balance. I mean, we can't lose sight of that. Okay, we've got probably no retro.
Well, we have one bargaining unit with some significant retro that will be up next month, or this month, excuse me. And as I put in my memo, what we're projecting for next year, total liability related to potential negotiations is between $500,000 and $750,000. Depends on the timing. We're very close. I did send out in my last update, an outline of where we were with each individual bargaining unit. Depending on the timing of things, whether it's this year or next year, our best guess right now, very educated guess, is that there'll be a liability of about $500,000 to $750,000 for next year. That will not be in this budget. There is, like I said earlier, $250,000 in a line in Nicole's budget that's usually used for that purpose.
And we're not giving our hand away on the premise that the sum total of all three contract negotiations will far exceed that. So nobody can look at that amount and say, aha, they got $250 in there for CSEA. It's just an allotment to help bridge the gap when the time comes.
Placeholder.
Yes.
I don't know if we wanted to delve more into the personnel issues, whether we should go into an executive session before we go any further in talking about union negotiations or updates or things like that. I don't know how anybody else feels. I'm not asking to do that at this time, but it's something that we should think about.
Well, I'd make a suggestion. Tonight is the night where there's,
Sorry, the clerk has just let me know that the live feed is down. So we may have to,
Yeah, Cody, are you working on it?
Yeah, it looks like Facebook crashed.
well, they got their own problems this week.
Oh, there it goes, back up.
Okay.
Okay, back
All
on.
When it comes back on, let's get into something really important.
It's back on.
well, I would say this, you know, I have had a couple legislators in today. We sat down with Nicole and really dug into a lot of the backup and the thought process. I would provide an open invitation at your convenience to sit down and talk about any of these personnel changes that we've gone through, and really take the time to show you the effort and the energy that was put into coming to where we're at today. So I put that on the table. If you know, it's been taken advantage of already, and I would certainly keep that open.
I think you gave a pretty good explanation of that. I was just thinking if we want to talk about, you know, the ancillary issues with the contract negotiations, that we should really have many more discussions about that here without going into executive.
I agree.
Matt, I know what you're going through. I talked with a lot of contractors recently, and labor is the biggest problem across the nation right now. So for you to be able to hang on to people for less money, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. And everybody's not looking for the long package, like you said. They're looking for the quick, what's in the envelope right now. So there isn't a contractor out there who can't get people, reliable people to show up. So I give you credit for hanging on to the people that we have. And think that we can do it for less money. It's impossible. I wish we could give all our taxpayers a break, but we just can't with the economy. So job histories that contractors had are 50 years accumulating are out the window. Nothing. Every bid day is a new bid day. Roofs that cost $96,000 are now $144 with nothing different than the material cost. So contractors are gun shy. People are gun shy. And, I appreciate what you're going through, trying to hang on to your budget and your staff. You know, so.
Thank you. Yeah, I've been hearing it quite a bit from the departments. And I've said that we had this as a major issue before it became a national problem. You know, I remember when Dollar General was coming in and they said they were doing a labor survey, and we were nervous on what it was going to say. That was years ago now, and the problem has only been exacerbated. Yeah, it's been tough, but
Well, it's like the union halls are empty. It's just like,
yeah,
it's a whole new learning curve this year.
and that was, you know, as we sat down and started talking to departments, it became very, very clear to me that this was the biggest challenge we're facing right now, in addition to, you know, things that have happened in previous years. And it's not just these positions; it's trying to keep some of the mid and high level people that we have and prevent, you know, some of these folks who've got great experience from going and taking a job where they're making $30,000, $40,000 more, because the competition for these positions is just so tough right now.
Go to Price Chopper this year versus 1 year ago. It's like night and day different. The gasoline.
I understand a lot of this, and the fund balance has always been a concern. And I think we're finally, with this extra sales tax, we're finally getting to the point where I'm feeling a lot more comfortable, especially in the past we've done a lot of bonding. And we're finally getting to the point where we can do a capital project, which we might be able to take $1 million out of the fund balance to do a capital project instead of borrowing and doing that. So I think we're finally, so I mean, with this budget, I'm so concerned, you know, that we go too crazy one way, because we're starting to put all the pieces together where we'll be able to, you know, maybe pay off a little debt, do some capital projects, give the employees a little bit more money, do all those things, and not see a huge tax increase. And I think that's, you know, that's where I would love to see this, you know, continue going.
And I think that's the road we're heading down. I mean, I remember I was in a room at my house on the call, first telephone call, where it was being stressed to prepare for 20% cuts, and look at potential layoffs and things of that nature. And to go from that point to where we are now is pretty remarkable. And you know, it looks like with gas prices, inflation, you know, sales tax is likely going to stay where it's going. So like it was said in the beginning of the meeting, we know it's a major problem. There's a lot of reasons, that we can try to push this off another year or maybe do less. I just said, let's try to solve this issue and also try to, show the employees that we do appreciate what they've done over the last year, which has been difficult.
The rescue money for the bonuses, Matt, I mean, was that, I know you reviewed it with Vineski and they're okay with it, but it was kind of something to help give people money who may not be being touched by these increases? Or will there be duplicity there, where they'll get an increase and they'll get a bonus?
Yeah, but I'll tell you right now, as someone who serves as a caseworker who would be an example of that, who is going in and seeing some of the most miserable things that are happening in this county, and it's a really difficult job, I would say that person has earned it and probably I wish I could do more. And actually, that came out of my last conference with the other county execs, and we went around the room, and everyone shared their opinions on what they were going to do with premium pay. And the responses were across the board. Some said, nope, I'm not doing it. They get paid what they get paid, all the way to the other side of folks that are in the same boat as I am. The reason I felt compelled to do it was because, it was an appropriate use in the federal government's eyes, but B, we all know that, we wish there was more we could do for employees, and, we're trying to come up with reasons and ways to use this money to make a difference. These are all, for the most part, local people in our community, and it just felt like the right thing to do. It really did. And, yes, across the counties, there's some that are not going, at 3,000, some are doing 1,500, some are doing 1,000, some are doing nothing. We have some towns in the municipalities that in the county that are considering it and are doing it. To me, it was just, again, when your employees are your biggest challenge, what can we do? Every tool in the toolbox, and it just seemed like a great way to try to push that needle.
Getting back to the COVID discussion, the $9.5 million that we were awarded, we have to use that, right? And there's a real question of what we have the ability to use it on, right? So, is this an opportunity to say, well, maybe we give them more than $3,000? If we have the room there, if we're just going to have to, if we're not going to use it, or we can't use it, that's another option too, that we look at that to solidify your employment base. I would, I'd be certainly.
He's got about 2.3 left, Legislator Patel. The memo he sent had a breakdown and it left 2.3.
And I would say that we're on the more higher side of.
But if we can't use it for anything else.
Well, there's a whole host of things that we can, and I think some other options. But I would say is similar to what we've done in the past, because you remember a number of the contracts that we approved, we had bonuses, and it's very similar. Yes, it's nice. We did bonuses for like a year of retroactivity, which is great, but it's still not going to address the base salary issue and the ability to retain across the board.
No, we've gone down that path. Now we're talking about how do you optimize that.
I thought that was, again, because some of the issues that were described of, okay, what are some of the other folks going to say or feel or this and that, because let's be honest, it's going to happen. But that to me was a great way to really show everyone that we're really trying our best here.
Remember, it's disposable income probably. It's going to go back into your community. Exactly. So there's the downside risk of that is minimal, or the reward can be exponential.
You're only sitting on 4.7 of it right now. The other half doesn't come in until next year, and what we've already allocated is far beyond 4.7.
Yeah, as you go through that
next year too.
Yeah.
So, my question is, what's our goal here tonight? Where's our discussion going here? Are we, we we've had a lot of discussion about personnel. What's our goal leaving this meeting today?
The goal of the meeting was for Matt to come in and present his budget, preparing us for our meetings with the department heads next Tuesday. And if there was any other questions, to be able to, understand the budget more, what Matt put in it and where he was going with it.
Morgan's taking notes, and any of the questions that come up, we'd be happy to try to get those information, or if there's any other backup documentation. We try to, really go from previous experience on what was asked for, what was used the most, and I hope that, what you received is at least in the ballpark of what you were looking for.
I'm glad you said that. I hate to sound like a broken record, and I can still remember the first conversation that I had with you, Mike, was when we do the budget, we need year-to-dates.
Yeah.
And we need priors. We got priors. I don't see the year-to-date. And also, we own a print shop, correct?
Yeah, well,
So,
kind of.
so my question is, and I've stated this before, we've got this size paper. Instead of doing this and then going through the budget and doing this every year, why can't we do it all in this size paper? And I know, Sean, you said before it's going to make the columns too small and we can't see it. I think we can get it on a sheet of paper this size to give us the information that we need without having to flip back and forth. At least for this year, I'd like to see some year-to-dates.
Gotcha, some year-to-dates for this year. I think one of the things, and I think is really probably something that needs to be addressed, and we've been putting it off, but, going to a different type of budget software system. The AS400 is not very user-friendly, and it doesn't produce the type of reports that we're accustomed to in our normal lives. I mean, it's still a green screen for Pete's sake. If the legislature really wanted us to look at upgrading that system, could try to be creative about funding it. I would love to see an easier process. Absolutely. I mean, the way it works this year is the backup documentation comes in. Nancy spends all day printing it and sorting it and getting it ready today. We try to provide the reports that we know are asked for. At least I got the actuals this year. We'll get you the year-to-dates first thing in the morning. But I think wholeheartedly, and actually I just got some emails from a vendor, and it's actually more of a nonprofit group that is saying, hey, you should update, and based on what I'm seeing, you could really use an update.
I'd be interested to see what that would cost.
We can take a look, and I know, Sean,
I know it drives you nuts.
it's a lot of money. It's a big dollar amount.
This is a question for Brian. You want me to add the 21 budget and year-to-date on this history one? And have it for you Tuesday?
On this one that you guys said? Yeah,
Next meeting?
that's fine.
I can have that for you for Tuesday next meeting.
That's fine.
Treasurer? That's a great idea.
And that'll be through September, right?
That'll be through the end of September.
Which is online in the.
Yeah, the reports, it's online, but I'll incorporate it into this.
Yeah, thank you.
This report.
Sean, I know we've talked about this a number of times, but this topic that we're discussing, when you're talking it's a multi-million-dollar upgrade, right, or at least $1 million.
Well,
Yeah, I just remember it being some ridiculous number, and it was like, okay, we're not gonna deal with that.
right now, there's one main financial vendor that most counties use, a financial software package. And of course, there's multiple modules, depending on how much you want to get involved. There's a basic financial, then there's an HR piece, there's a purchasing piece, there's an auditing piece. It's, like I said, like a lot of counties, it's probably about a $1.5 to $2 million investment if you do an all-encompassing financial system. It would be a PC-based system, and it would no longer be like an AS400 basis. But
Would you have annual fees on top of that?
you would have your annual maintenance fees. Up until a couple of years ago, there was actually two main ones at Blue County, is either Munis or New World Systems. They have now merged into one, so there's two separate systems, but it's owned by the same company right now, so.
And then you always fall back on, yeah, it's not user-friendly, but it's reliable, it works, and it's.
And there are less expensive financial systems out there, but as far as like for county government, that's the main player, and I would not like to be a guinea pig for a smaller software.
Now, are they done can you buy them over time, like 4 or 5 years, like some of the other programs that we've purchased?
Well, I mean, you could buy a couple modules down the road, buy another, I believe, that's definitely.
My question, pretty much the Chairman had well, but could it be amortized? I mean, if it was up to me, I'd get all the modules amortized, or how long could we do that? How long could we amortize them?
Like I said, that can be run as a capital project. So you could pay for it over,
We could do that.
I believe like software
Yeah, I
package
got the
would
money.
be paid for over 5 years.
I like that, yeah.
Don't borrow when you got money.
I like that.
Something we've discussed.
Put that in
in
our
our
change.
You know, when it comes to the fund balance though, I know I'm prognosticating up into $17 million range, but we have to also keep in mind that when we strike this budget, if we use, you know, the 12.4 that is on record as having been our fund balance as of 12/31/20 is going to go down between 8 and 10, as Matt's memo indicated, if it's up in the 3.5, you know, what I mean, that type of thing.
I'm gonna launch off from what you just said. If that does happen and we use the 3.7, then we're down to a fund balance less than what we, as a legislature started.
Yeah.
Most years, our fund balance has actually decreased. It's up until the last 2 years that there's been an increase in the end from the AUD.
Yeah, no, I know.
And this 6.4 million increase seems like a fluke.
Well, I don't know if it's a fluke, because I think we're on a similar path this year.
Well,
But things
happen.
happen.
Chime in, there is a reason for,
Is it the back billing, some of it from?
no, a lot of it is, because 2020 was the COVID year. So during the high peaks of the COVID, a lot of the county was shut down.
We incurred less expense.
Correct, a lot less expenses were incurred during that time.
On top of the gain in sales tax.
Correct.
That was what the whole, you know.
Because in
Total.
19, our fund balance, it did grow in 19, but it was
Yes.
only 340,000
Yeah.
that it went up, according to the AUD.
Yeah. We got, well, in 16 it ended at 9.3. 17 it ended at 8.2. 18 it ended at 7.8. 19 it ended at 7.1. So it went down every year, you're right. And then, this is from something Sean had for budgeted fund balance versus actual used, and what it ended up being at the end of that year. So the first year really spiked up for us was from 19 to 20.
You can't forget the hotel on the hill either.
That's true. But we used that money.
But I guess the point I was trying to make is, we're not gonna see 15 to 17 million in the fund balance until these numbers are cooked, until 21's numbers are cooked in the books, which is by next year's audit or later, you know, so.
And even in the proposal to you, I mean, we could have, you know, based on what we're seeing this year and last year in sales tax, delivered you a budget with, you know, fund balance at, you know, 2.5 with a bigger number in sales tax. Felt like.
And that still could happen.
Yeah, exactly, and so, you know, there's some,
You know.
there's some different ways to look at this here, and ultimately, I think you end up in the same place. If you have a low sales tax number and it's way over, but you have more fund balance than the budget, you go use, you're still ended up in the same place.
Hey, Jeff, you like to spend money, we get it up to about 2 million next year, we just need a little extra. I know you try to keep pushing more, he just wants to spend, can you help us out a little more?
So on that note, what I would say is I'd be in favor of boosting the sales tax number up $2 million or whatever number to reduce, to add to Brian's point about, if we're fund balance continues to grow, we're overtaxing the people. Okay, and I'd be the last one to say that because I've always complained about fund balance, right? I always remind you of fund balance. But, the employees, good. Taxpayers, even better. Okay, so I don't have any problem with that.
Well, there'll be an adjustment, but I think the treasurer wanted to chime in on it.
Just so you're clear, when you add $1 million of sales tax revenue, you have to add 430,000 of distribution sales tax. So you're only realizing 57% county.
570 on every million.
Correct.
But
27-43 split.
Point well taken.
Yes, I'm willing to bet against the price of gasoline going down.
Well, at least not for the next 3 years.
It was higher in the previous 4 years.
And that was one other, thing I wanted to mention, playing around with these numbers today. The $2 million increase year over year, where did I have this? Is like, it's only going to, I know where I'm at. The cost of, right now, inflation, I just looked it up, is at 5.25%. And this is a 1.7% increase over last year's budget. So, in my mind's eye, cost of doing business is going up. It's costing John Q. Public an extra 5.2%. Might be costing our county, 1.7%.
But if you extrapolate that everybody's paying 5.7% more for everything that they buy, our sales tax should follow that in some shape or form and give us some projection. Because everything is, you're not only paying more for gas.
No.
You're paying more for shoes and tires and
Houses.
corn, and houses.
All right.
What's the current rate of inflation?
All in all, I understand that there's some shock value when the legislature gets something that's a little different than what I've been giving for years, year after year after year, and when you see, changes in personnel. But I really think our department heads do a great job of trying to hold the line and as best they can and do as much as they can with what they got. I think they certainly should be commended, and I think Mike's point about inflation and costs rising, I can't tell you how many times we're, just trying to squeeze that extra cost out of the budget that's already there because you had some lines open with personnel where you exceeded your revenue, or, maybe you didn't have one of the contracts that you thought you were going to have. And the department heads all have that mindset. There's no doubt about it.
So again, Martin?
I do like the idea of inflating the sales tax, but let's see where our adjustments come in before we say, oh yeah, we're going to add 2 million to sales tax revenue.
I would personally hope that next Tuesday, when people take a look at departmentals, we have the departmentals coming in, that you guys do come with some of your changes that you can actually ask the department heads, if those changes could be made or not made, and, let them justify or not justify. Because in the past, it's nice when you can ask them and they say, you know what, this is why that number is that, this is why it needs to be there, and you can't change this, but we can make a little change here, or we can make a little difference here. Because they're the ones that have to live with that budget, and, they're the ones that we'll have to come back in front of us in January and say, see, I told you, if you cut this, I was gonna be back and do it, or not, so I think that's a good step.
And the highlights of their changes are here for a starting point. On the notes to the year-over-year changes.
Anybody
And
have-
if something was missed in the year-over-year net changes by department, it likely is in the personnel changes. So for example, Mike pointed out that I had a couple changes in my budget that added up to $15,000 that wasn't in the net change, but it was included in the other corresponding documentation. So between those two documents, it should be all set department by department. But, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness in the conversation, and, like I said, we have an open door. It's been utilized, and we'll work around your schedule if you want to come in, or phone call, or whatever it may be, to go over some of the specifics, as we go forward.
Does anybody else have any other questions for Sean, or?
Not for Sean or Matt, I'd just like to make a comment. I'm always pushing you guys to have goals. Before we come and meet next week, we should, I think, have some clear goals that we've already talked about, staying below fund balance, or below the cap, using up as little as we can to maintain the fund balance, because we'd like to pay cash for things rather than bond for things. Goals, it seems pretty clear that our goals are to address the shortage of employees or shortcomings in pay. I don't know if anybody else has any goals that they'd like to bring up, but I think if we don't have goals, we don't have any direction other than just going through, looking at each line and saying, oh gee, I think that's too much.
Well, I think you're right. Past couple of years, we met with Matt and Sean a month before they put the budget together and talked about those things, right? Less use of fund balance, eliminate unused positions, things like that. So I think you're on the right track. That's there, though.
I will add, we've stuck with the things that you've asked for in the past, like the unused positions outside of the DSS. There was, I think, 14 new positions requested. They were all eliminated, and I said, we're not going to add new positions for titles in which you have vacancies. So I just wanted to reassure the board that, those priorities, I think, still remain. The big change for me this year was, obviously addressing the employees.
I think the big thing is we have a business to run. We need to be able to do, we can cut, but when we get all done, how are we doing what we need to be able to do to run it? And I think we have to look at everything and, as across the board, and say, this is where we should be.
If, everybody wants their roads done and their, requests that goes into DPW, but if we can't find people to drive trucks, it's what good is it worth? And everybody wants to depend on 911 when they call, but, if we can't find dispatchers to man the office, what good is it worth? And that literally is where it's at right now. And if you ask Eric about what he's dealing with it over at DPW, especially with the drivers, he'll turn red and veins will start popping out of his head. It's a challenge. There's no doubt about it.
I don't ask DPW for much.
Never. No.
That's not the only thing that turns them red with veins.
Yeah, that's a good point. But the same thing with the DSS, with the caseworkers, these caseloads are high. And, we're talking about, tough situations, kids getting abused and sexual assault and things of that nature. And, when you got that many vacancies and it takes 6 months to get someone trained, we'll be the first one to be called out on the carpet or get sued or whatever when something isn't done appropriately. And it's just, again, that's why I say for those specific positions, it's almost at crisis level, if not at crisis level.
But on the flip side of increasing all the salaries, when we fill positions, filling all these positions is going to cost expenditures to go up too. So, it's a
True, and I would say this, this puts us in a better position, but it's still not, we're not going to be one that, they're $5,000, $10,000 more than another county, let's go there. It's still going to be a challenge, even with this, where we're at now. It's still going to remain a challenge, especially operators, dispatch, it's,
Brian?
Legislators.
Well, I got two things. Speaking of DSS, you mentioned that Saratoga County has 5 additional hours. Why is that we don't have the same,
they work a 40-hour work week.
Yeah, they were.
and is that by contract that we don't hear?
So what happens is a lot of caseworkers or different employees won't realize that. And this has happened. I think there was one week where we had, actually 2 people come back and say, your grass wasn't greener as a week. And, what happens is they see the salary and don't realize it's a $5 extra hours a week. And then you add the drive and all of a sudden that prospect didn't seem so.
So I think there's a couple things, and I don't know if Nicole, maybe you already do this, but, in my opinion, is you need to sell the benefits that we have here. Yeah, okay, you're gonna go to Saratoga County, you're gonna make more money, you're gonna spend more money in gas. You're gonna work 5 more hours. But not only just that, but and I understand people are looking for the buck right now, but believe me, when you get my age, you want a retirement. You gotta sell that to these younger people, say, listen, in 30 years, you're gonna be happy that you have a retirement plan, because I tell you right now, to do it on your own,
And,
you don't.
and not surprisingly, she's already developing an Excel sheet with pie graphs and things of that nature. But I'll tell you, one of the challenges that I'm running into in speaking with these people is tier 5 and 6 isn't what 4, even 4 or 3 used to be. And so,
No, I know,
That's
but
what
it's
it
still,
is.
there's still a benefit there.
Oh, yeah,
There's
absolutely. I
still-
couldn't agree more.
Health insurance is a benefit. I mean, go buy that on your own.
well, and that was the one example I brought up. There was a flyer for Walmart Distribution Center that was up in a break room. And Nicole actually went through and looked at the benefit package and compared it to ours, and it was a no-brainer. But, that's what we're battling.
Right, and I think if you open that dialogue between the employees, maybe that will trickle down to, hey, well, I talked to Nicole, I was gonna go to Walmart, but I'm better off staying here, type thing. The second thing that I have is, when do we, and if we decide that we want to take and use fund balance to either reduce our debt, when would we do that, and what process in this budget? Would it be the budget, or would it be a resolution that we do later on? I mean, I know it's maybe premature, but I think we need to start thinking about that. If and when, we see numbers continue to grow, why pay interest on something that we could pay off? Or in running a business myself, if I can pay for something without paying with interest, it's a no-brainer. Why would you pay whatever the percentage is if you have cash to pay for it now?
I mean, in my mind's eye, I think that's a great idea, but I think we gotta wait. I mean, if we're gonna, even if we adjust this fund balance going into this budget from 3.7? 3.7 down to 2.5. I mean, it's still gonna bring us down to 10, right? Because we're at 12.4. I mean, personally, I feel more comfortable talking about using excess cash or fund balance to pay down debt once we have the audit next spring, and see how much sediment fell to the bottom line, how much of it did we actually use this year, how much did we grow it by not using it plus adding sales tax. And so at the very least, I think when we see the audit and we see where our fund balance position is, if it's 17 million or something, I'd say we start talking to Sean. Sean, I mean, can you take a look at our debt and see what's worth paying off? Or
Also, I just want to chime in here quickly, because we just had an internal capital projects meeting in preparation for a presentation to the larger group. And, we still, the recorder building is going to be a cost that we incur and then are reimbursed for relatively quickly, as well as the additional $6 million for the DPW facility. So those upcoming expenses, as well as maybe Eric's 2 dump trucks, it might be things we want to look at, both short-term and even a little bit longer.
rather than using it to pay for a current project versus paying down.
Just a thought, but I think there's plenty of opportunities there to
Yeah,
try to whittle away at it.
Either way, whittle away
601,
at debt.
right? Yeah.
Either don't incur debt, or pay off.
Yeah,
Brian, Nicole and I have had probably 2 or 3 conversations in regards to the benefit packages, because when an employee can see what their salary is, what their benefits are for their health insurance, all those things, and it comes down and says, oh, I'm making $40,000, but then when you start adding all those things up, and it says, wow, really? You know, it's costing you 65, you know, go take that somewhere else. I mean, I had the same conversation with my son who's out, you know, as a salesman saying, I hope you're putting this much money away, because when you're 60 years old, you know, what are you going to have, you know, in the salary that way? You don't have a retirement system, you know. So, Bob?
I think it's time that we start talking as a legislative body about strategic planning, where we can talk about things like how to use the fund balance, spending cash instead of bonding. You know, that's, if there's one shortcoming I think we have is we can talk here when we leave and it's done. Some things just go over the dam. So at some point as a body, I would really like to see some exercises in strategic planning.
But I also think we're at a point now where we're much better than we were 3 years ago. And now we're starting to get to the point where we can sit down and make a plan. 3 years ago, we were just kind of
You're hanging on.
hoping that, you know, the fund balance would just stay status quo and it wasn't going to run out in 10 years. So we were making those progresses. And yes, now that we're seeing an increase, you know, yes, we can. Sean and I talked about getting that information together so people could actually see where the fund balance is actually going and not just throwing numbers back and forth. And I think once we have the fund balance stuff come, you know, April, we'll have a lot better
That's a
direction.
good time to sit down as a group. I mean, I would find us having a meandering, nice to meet among ourselves, you know, because we've done this all on other boards and other things, you know, in a private place away from here. But I could see meandering conversations without having guide sticks with us in the form of a treasurer, you know what I mean?
I understand.
Yeah, just so let's do this, but we can't do that because, you know, I mean.
But we have conversations.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, there's some of them are good ideas, some of them are just dumb ideas.
Yeah, that's the whole
I'll
idea.
take credit for those.
You're right.
But we need to think strategically, and we need to quantify and qualify where we want to be and how we're going to get there.
Yep.
You know, you have your budget at home, I'm sure, and this is what you're going to do. So, and I think that in the meantime would have helped also with understanding the employment issue with the employees. And maybe we can have better, amongst us, can have better communication with the executive branch.
Yeah, as a result of it, yeah.
Nicole, did you have something?
Oh, it was in regards to what Legislator Sweet said earlier, the new Kronos HR system that you had approved recently, that actually has a component and module in there that will allow me to do that. So we're in the building phase of it. That will take some time, but that will be an end result where we'll be able to provide that to every single employee as to what the work is and be able to calculate forward so we can, Morgan can put that out there when we advertise for jobs as well.
A lot of people are short-sighted, really are, unfortunately.
Yes.
They see their paycheck and that's it.
But it'll give the overall, as we have spoken about before, and allow us to advertise that.
Good.
Unfortunately, in today's world, people are looking at what happens in their check today.
Oh, absolutely.
And I also think Matt's rescue fund outline, I don't know if you guys looked at it closely, but one element in there was an HVAC system in the new building, which it can be spent on Keep in mind, anything on there, they've met already with this Benesky and Company. So they have a good grip on what it can be used on and what it can't be used on. And using that firm. And anyway, $1.6 million of it was earmarked for the HVAC system, which fits with the theme of what everybody's talking about. You know what I mean? It's perhaps going to limit the total project cost over there by using, you know, a resource that's not even going to affect our fund balance to help, you know, pay down the total cost.
In addition to that, we tried to find ways to offset costs we knew we would incur or potentially bond for, and that is a great example. But also another example are the HVAC units on pods A, B, and C, as well as the big unit up at the jail that are all 25 years old.
About the legislative chamber. Just saying.
We want advanced plane propellers for that.
I think we need a filtration system here.
Yeah, so I think we're all on the very same line of thinking here as far as trying to.
Anything else, Mario? If not, a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.